Get this party started. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Olson. I'm the CEO of the Greater Eureka Chamber of Commerce, and we are glad you're all here. We still have folks who are joining us, so hopefully we'll have an even bigger crowd who are here for this important conversation. This conversation is part of our chamber's Conversations with Leaders program. We've previously talked about offshore wind and business security and homelessness here in Eureka. And the next two coming up conversations will be on housing and transportation. So we have some exciting conversations coming up, but very pleased to have with us some fantastic leaders in the field of from our county's cannabis industry. And they've all generously given of their time to prepare for this conversation and to participate with you all. As we all know, cannabis is a huge part of our economy, has been for many, many decades. And most people know that the cannabis industry, following regulation actions, has faced some challenges. So we're here to share what the current reality is, what some of those regulations are. We've got a couple of folks three folks who are farmers who can share their personal experiences. We have Tina Gordon from Moonmade Farms. We have Johnny Casali, who is with Huckleberry Hill Farms. And Supervisor Bushnell, Michelle, is a grower also, correct, Michelle? We also have
I have Bootleg Farms.
Great. Bootleg Farms, perfect. And then Guy Rocour, who is with founder and CEO of Papa and Barkley, which produces cannabis related goods, products. And then we have Madeline DeLapp, who is the executive director of the Humboldt County Growers Alliance. So thanks to all of you for being here. And we'd like to go ahead and open the conversation with some introductions. So each of the participants, each of our speakers will share a couple of minutes about themselves and their connection to the cannabis industry. And then we have a series of questions that they will be discussing. So for those of you who are participants, you are welcome to put questions in the chat at any time. Our speakers are invited to respond to those questions in real time if you'd like. If there are any questions that haven't been answered in chat, I will go ahead and make sure that they are asked before the end of our call. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end, so you can write down your questions, save your questions for the end as well. So all good, ready to roll? If you have any questions for how this is all going, for those of you who are not speakers, just go ahead and put those in the chat and we will be monitoring those as well. So our first speaker is Michelle Bushnell, who is a county supervisor. And Michelle, we really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for the invitation. So hi everybody, Michelle. I was born and raised in Southern Humboldt, long generation of ranching and timber families, fourth generation actually. Graduated from South Fork High School with Johnny, and a business owner. I own a retail store in Garberville. My husband and I have a ranch, and he's a land surveyor. We have 5 children that reside in Southern Humboldt with 5 grandkids, and I became Humboldt County Supervisor in 2021, and currently I hold a cannabis license, 2.0 cannabis license for Bootleg Farms in the Southern Humboldt area, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, folks. My name is Tina Gordon. I'm the founder and owner of Moonmade Farms. We're in Southern Humboldt. And I'm originally from San Francisco, came up here in 2007, ended up making a documentary about a local drummer named Joni Hannon, who owned the Grotto and was quite a character. And I ended up having the great privilege of cultivating this plant. And I stayed here for this plant and for this place. This plant and this place in Humboldt County is where I discovered the natural world. I discovered nature and came into the consciousness that we're living in this incredible ecosystem. And I have transitioned from having a medical collective into this new regulated market. And I'm really inspired by the fact that what I'm seeing is a lot of enthusiasm about sun-grown and regenerative sun-grown, and people who are really enthusiastic about Humboldt County. And so I'm really excited for this opportunity to meet everyone and this incredible intersection of people. And I'm looking forward to this great conversation.
Thanks, Tina. Go ahead, Guy.
Hi, how are you, everyone? My name is Guy Roquart. I am the CEO of Papa and Barkley. Papa and Barkley is a wellness company based in Eureka. We have about 75,000 square feet of manufacturing space. Our primary location is the old Kmart on Broadway as you enter, and we also have a couple of smaller facilities in Old Town. Our mission is unlocking the power of cannabis to improve people's lives, and to that end, we believe that products should be clean. We do believe that sun-grown flower is more sustainable than indoor flower. And given that we're out of prohibition, we believe that, especially here where cannabis has thrived for many generations, given access to good agricultural technologies, we can grow some of the best cannabis on the planet using regenerative technologies and sun-grown, and keeping our footprint down while still providing quality medicine. So I'm thankful to everyone to allow me to be on the call to just share my thoughts about how I feel about cannabis and how I feel about the county. I moved here. We started the business about 7 years ago. I moved my family here about 4 years ago. I have an older daughter who's in grad school. She lives in King Salmon, and my younger daughter attends Arcata High School. So I'm very happy to be part of this community, and also very happy to be working with this magical plant.
Thanks, Guy. Your turn, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all the attendees for having us on here today. My name's Johnny Casali. I'm a second-generation cannabis farmer, moved here to the same piece of property that I'm actually sitting on today. Back in 1978 with my mom and my stepdad, who really wanted just to escape the life of the city and really move up to the country and to kind of create a lifestyle of our own, and in the way we wanted to do it and how we wanted to do it. And it really took all of us as a family really to create the magic that we have here today. And, you know, the journey in the cannabis world hasn't always been easy, and we've always been kind of hiding in the shadows and using it as one method to supplement our income in order to survive here in the country. We were also part-time loggers. My mom and my stepdad were commercial salmon fishermen, commercial albacore fishermen, commercial crabbers. We had a small nursery down at the bottom of the property that we sold to the local cultivators. So we did a multiple of different things, even cut firewood in the wintertime and sold it in town for $100 a cord. And so it was all of those things that allowed us, including cannabis, to really survive here in the country. And as different things like logging got more regulated and fishing got more regulated, they became less of a source of income for us, and cannabis really replaced that lack of income with more of the income that we needed to survive. And, you know, part of my story, you know, following my mom around since I was 10, growing the cannabis and falling in love with it and the medicinal values that it has to provide people, really led me down a path that eventually landed me getting charged federally for growing this plant as a first-time nonviolent offender back in 1992, and ended up getting a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in federal prison, and did 8 out of those 10 years and had 5 years probation. So even though this journey for me hasn't been all roses, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, because this plant and what it stands for is far bigger than one person. And it's really just ultimately the story of, you know, the Emerald Triangle and what a lot of us went through to get to this point. So I'm so grateful really to bond with people that have kind of seemed in one way or another to live a whole different lifestyle, even though we were in the same county, and really look forward in the future to really bonding as one and making this whole thing about all of us and contributing to the legal industry now as a legal cannabis farmer with the state and with the county of Humboldt. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Johnny. Nadeline.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nadeline Delap. I am the Executive Director of Humboldt County Growers Alliance. I originally came to Humboldt County from Southern California in 2007 to go to Humboldt State University. I fell in love with this place and the environment and the people. And I am proud to call this Humboldt my home. I studied environmental science with an emphasis in public policy. I then went to work for EPIC, the Environmental Protection Information Center, from 2008 until 2016. And that is really a lot of the point when people think of the green rush. And as an environmentalist, we were definitely raising the flag and saying there are problems that are happening to our watersheds, our wildlife, and our social networks. And it was because of those cries for help that our newly elected legislators, Jim Wood and Senator McGuire, really carried the baton to develop the Medical Marijuana Regulation Safety Act that was signed into law by Jerry Brown in October of 2015. Coming forward as an environmentalist, I worked in coalition with the other top 4 environmental organizations in this county to help shape the medical marijuana land use ordinance in partnership with the cannabis industry as well as community partners. And that process is what then allowed over 2,300 pre-existing cannabis farmers the opportunity to come into compliance with these new laws, which was really amazing. And there were an estimated 15,000 grows in 2015. And maybe 6,000 to 8,000 individual operators. And 2,300 of those people said, hey, I'm willing to come into compliance. And so then Prop 64 happened. The voters of California approved Prop 64 by almost 60%, which then created a whole new legal structure for our farmers and for our community. And so our county had to do a second land use ordinance to make sure that what we were creating was in conformance with the new state laws. As I decided at that point in time in late 2016 that my efforts and energies would be better served forming Humboldt County Growers Alliance with my friend and partner, Tara Carver, to create a trade association so that we could help support, empower, and enable our pre-existing operators in our newly emerging cannabis industry to participate in this legal paradigm. And so for the last 8 years, we have been front and center working with our farmers, our manufacturers, our distributors to help create a system that works not only for the farms, but for the environment in our society. And it is a privilege to be here today to talk about the issues that we're facing. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadeline. You've given us some good framework for more recent history. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the longer term history of cannabis in Humboldt. We have some folks who are Humboldt lifers, others who are involved in this who have picked up the legacy of growers who were on their property before them. So invite you to talk about your understanding of and your experience of cannabis and growing historically. What does that look like? So I'm kind of looking at Johnny and Tina and probably Michelle to talk about that.
Johnny, you want to start us out?
Sure, yeah. And, you know, for me, it was just the really excitement of being able to hang out with my best friend who was my mother, and really spend a lot of quality time with her. And, you know, looking back on how I grew up, it really just her way as a mother really to give me the best type of lifestyle as she could. And so I don't hold any resentment with her with what had happened to me. But you know, it was just an amazing way to grow up. I really loved the outdoors. I really loved fishing. I became a guide on the Eel River. And as kids, as 15-year-old kids, many of my other friends were running throughout the county, really doing the same type of thing. And, you know, we were all evading enforcement, and we were all trying to figure out ways just to make enough money in order to be able to surf and to fish and to hunt and do all those exciting things that we wanted to do, and not have a, you know, a regular job. And it was a lot of work what we did, and it was probably a lot more work than, you know, just getting a regular job for me. And so it was a long journey. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought, but you know, I also worked as a choker setter, and I was, you know, raised by Catholics, and so the rules were strict. I went to school. I had to do my homework, just the same exact thing as most kids. And in the summer months, I was able to grow 10 plants. I was able to talk to my mom, and you know, one of the rules and the conditions that she gave me was that I couldn't use any of this money for anything fun, and it had to go towards a college education or to something that would help my future. And so I bought a piece of property when I was 16 years old, and along the Eel River, and my mom had to co-sign for me because I was so young. But you know, the story that I'm telling, and the story that my experience was a story that could have happened and could be told by any of my friends and family that grew up. And we were always really good stewards of the land. We always took care of the land, was our first priority. Now, as a legal cannabis farmer, it's the first and foremost most important thing that I have to do here on my property. And we're really trying to distinguish ourselves from, you know, corporate cannabis and the larger grows, that we're different and we're special and we're unique. And I have 4 different certifications. Some of them are sanctioned by Department of Fish and Wildlife. Some of the other ones, like the fish friendly certification, it's the only farm in the state that has that certification. So we're trying to be good stewards of the land. We're working on this farm with Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Water Board, a lot of the different agencies, even the DCC, to build the bridges of this fractured relationship that we've always had here in this county, that we can't have anymore if we want to exist and participate as one and have a thriving cannabis industry that contributes to the county as a whole. And so, yeah, I kind of lost where I was supposed to be talking about, but I'll pass the torch to you, Michelle, and you can pick up and kind of get to just where I was headed.
Okay, so my story is a little different than Johnny's. Growing up in the same era as Johnny in Southern Humboldt, but my family were not cultivators. We had a ranch and did logging, and I didn't become a cultivator until later in life. But as a young girl, you know, in Southern Humboldt, it was prevalent, the cultivation community. Johnny talked a little bit about the divide and what that created back then, and that is a true statement. You know, and we used to, when we were growing up, you know, it was the Edwardsburg area and the other area, and it was you know, traditionally known as, oh well, those are rednecks and ranchers loggers, and that area over there were the forgive me, but hippie pot growers. And that's the what I grew up with. And you know, always knowing that the families from the cultivation community very much participated in the Southern Humboldt community, and the fundraisers, and Johnny and his friends, you know, that played sport. It's just normal. Like Johnny said, I don't even think of it being different, but hard workers. And nowadays, cultivation for me means that I get to multi-use my properties. You know, I was able to purchase a piece of property that I needed to pay for, and one thing I do on that property is cultivate under a 2.0, which is a brand new farm, not a pre-existing farm. I also log that property, and so staying with my roots, like Johnny is so proud of his roots, I additionally am as well, and added cultivation to that. I think what the cultivators bring to, I know what the cultivators bring to Humboldt County is special and unique, and the pride that they have. It isn't like you go to Santa Barbara or you go to LA and they have that history and they have that story and they have what Johnny can tell you is ducking and hiding. You know, as a 15-year-old or a 10-year-old, that's not, that's exciting to a lot of people, but also scary, as Johnny can say. He believes in what he does. I also, as a new cultivator, believe in what I do and the sustainability that it brings to Humboldt County. And I am a great steward of my land. I love my land and I take care of it. It's not trashed. It's beautiful. My farm's beautiful. It's different than Johnny's, but it's, and that's what's unique about each one of us, is that cultivators have a unique, different style and what they see for their future. One thing that's certain, though, for the cultivation community is it's tough with brand new entity coming in, legalization in 2016, and then the state coming forward. You know, Fish and Wildlife has their own regulations, Water Board has their own regulations, and the cultivating community, unlike any other entity, has had to jump through a lot of hoops. And it really has been a moving target. Do this, no, do this, no, that doesn't work, do this. And that's been really hard for cannabis in Humboldt. And now with the economic crash of cultivation, which was really brought on by Prop 64, not having a cap, and the overproduction in California, we, once again, cultivators are really struggling and finding a path once again in an industry that they have created from time and time ago. And so that, you know, as far as the history in Humboldt County, you know, it's always been here. It's always been the undertone that, you know, cultivators really take care of the community. They, you know, shop local, they have businesses, they are great stewards of their land. And it's something that we're very proud of.
Thanks, Michelle. Tina, I know a little bit of your story. I've been up to your beautiful property, and I'm looking forward to what you have to share with our folks here about your personal story, but also the story of your land.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And, you know, it's humbling to be here with this group of amazing people, Michelle and Johnny, and your stories and your experience here. And, you know, part of what I love about this place and being here is that every day is an incredible learning curve. You know, this lifestyle could not be different than the one I came from. I was born and raised in San Francisco, low income during a time that was very kind of utopian in San Francisco, but also a time during which many people left the urban areas to seek another life in places like this. And so you know, I didn't go camping. I didn't have houseplants. Like, I had absolutely no awareness of the natural world at all. A small backyard that was kind of challenging to play in, right? And I actually had no interest. My life led me to being an underground artist and musician for many years. I was a rock and roll drummer for 20 years, van touring and recording and putting out records and in a DIY, which means do it yourself, kind of very independent situation. I was really obsessed with counterculture and marginalized cultures and living the creative lifestyle, which I still 100% support. And when I transitioned up here, what I found was this was the other life for me. And what made sense for me was living this very kind of independent lifestyle with daily learning and really living by kind of different rules. And those rules to me now are the rules of the land and rules of nature, and guided by lunar farming, guided by the natural cycles. And what I really have learned up here, and what is so important to me, is how unique this place is and how much it offers. The climate here and the geography and the geology here is unique worldwide. You know, this is a Mediterranean climate. I think 3% of the entire globe offers this kind of climate. And in this climate that is so unique and so precious, that was stewarded for a very long time with all of the inhabitants before us, it feels like such a responsibility to take on being really the first kind of settlers to this land. So the ladies who were here before me, Joni and Marianne, who were here for many years, they were the first people who lived annually, not just seasonally, on this farm and in this land, on this land out here. And so it's with incredible respect that I carry forth their legacy and what they were doing. We're sun grown and we're Sun and Earth and DemPure certified. So we're a regenerative farm, and the whole goal is to contribute more than we extract. And that is true not only with the farm, but the 3 pillars for Sun and Earth, which I love so much, are earth care, human empowerment, and community engagement. And all of those pieces are important to me. What I've learned through this plant and what I feel is important to bring forward is a sense of mutualism. So everything that we do is not just to help us or our farm or us as people, but it's to contribute back to the land. It's to contribute to community. It's to lift everybody who is going through this incredibly challenging and historical time, which is bringing cannabis to the world in a way that there's never been accessed before. And so now this ancient plant is going through a new identity, a new iteration, and I feel it's our responsibility to bring people the best possible product that we can for their health and well-being. And it's an absolute honor to do that in Humboldt County.
I'm going to ask you a follow-on question, Tina. When I first met you, I guess it's been a couple of years ago, you were sharing with me that you were moving from being a grower who was providing your product to other companies, but you were, because of the changes in the market, you were in a position that you needed to create your own brand and that kind of thing, as I understand. Can you talk a little bit about that? And Johnny, maybe you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that. The thing that I've become really passionate about is sharing the story and sharing the story through building a brand. And that brand now is an independent, it's independently owned. And I call this a craft brand. And that's defined by independent ownership. It's defined by high touch. And it's defined by like small releases, right? So, and so we are considered a really small brand, I think, on the shelf right now, but it's incredible because we are next to a lot larger brands. And so throughout the market in California, we're represented through our reserve, which is the Moon Made Farms Reserve. And we also have co-branding partners. And those collaborations are incredible. It just reaches a greater audience, being able to do these collaborations with folks who are aligned. And they're aligned in terms of the way that they do things, the philosophy they bring, and their desire to bring people really quality products. So seeing brands out of Humboldt County also, and that connection to Southern California or the Central Coast or the Bay Area, and sharing the Humboldt story with them, that's a huge part of what we do and why we're doing it.
Great, thanks, Tina. And Johnny, it looks like you want to share as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, you know, we actually pivoted a little bit in putting stuff in our own jars and our own brand, more so because we were trying to way to capture a little bit, a little more profit as the oversaturation in the market became real and is probably as bad as it's been since legalization. You know, it cost us $100 to trim a pound. It cost us all our inputs that we put in there. It costs us 17% when we sell it through a distributor, which we're required to do by the state. A lot of the times after we give it to our distributor and they give it to the retailer, a lot of the times it never ends up getting paid back to the distributor, who then doesn't pay the farmer. So we were just trying to find ways to capture a little bit more profit and enable our farms to actually make it. I'm a 5,000 square foot farm. I'm one of the smallest ones in the state of California. I also pivoted a little bit by adding one of 3 tourism licenses that Humboldt County has, and trying to capture a little bit of income with tourism and really sharing and highlighting the journey that we've all been on as a community to get to this point. And it's just, I think we're going to talk about that later, but it's just amazing to watch people from all over the world come onto this farm and watch how emotional they get as I get emotional. And they'll never forget what we've created here in Humboldt County as a community and who we are. So it's really special. It's really unique, but that's what we're trying to do here by building our brand and selling our product and letting people experience the clean, unique strains and cultivars that we grow here that nobody else in the world has.
Great, thanks for adding that. I'm going to pivot over to Guy, and just because it seems like the right thing to do, and get your perspective. I know when we were talking yesterday, you were talking about, celebrating the plant as medicine and the land it comes from. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your history? You shared a little bit in your introduction, but can you talk a little bit more about the importance of Humboldt cannabis to your business and whatever else you'd like to share?
Sure, thank you. So I started in cannabis, about 25 years ago. I used to work in entertainment for a gentleman named Montel Williams, who was a talk show host. And when he came out with his MS, I started advocating. And then at one point I started burning one light, and 2 lights became more and more. And then when we went through the crash in 2008, I was able to get more houses because the ladies pay. And at one point I just kind of found myself off grid, providing safe access. And I had a good friend tell me, you really can't be advocating and, trying to get on TV and also providing safe access. And I was raising a family at the time. So I decided, well, I'll just provide safe access for a while. And that actually came to an end right when Colorado went legal. My daughter was applying to the Naval Academy, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm like way off grid. Even though I was able to get an admiral and a senator to do the letters of recommendation, I realized me personally probably needed to start thinking about like what the future holds. Proposition 19 had just failed here. I created an early vape pen, and it got a lot of interest from folks back east. So I was like, I don't think you can do anything here in California with other people's money, but Colorado was on the radar. So they brought me out there. I built a C1D1 lab doing light hydrocarbon, and it was just us and OPEN. The reason why I give that context is my biggest blessing was meeting my partner, Adam, who had created this balm by just soaking flowers, by soaking flowers in a crock pot and rubbing that on his dad's back. Papa, who the company is named after, had been diagnosed with stenosis of the back and was on hospice, and nothing seemed to be working. Here it is, soaking these awesome inhalable grade flowers in coconut oil, rubbing it on his dad's back. It worked. Of course, when I met Adam, because as a young scientist during Prohibition, all I wanted was toys and all the stuff that we were denied. And I started getting those things in Colorado. And here's this gentleman soaking flowers in coconut oil. And I'm like, no, you just want to put a BHO extract in there, butane extract in there. It'll be easier to scale. And it did not work. It did not work at all. And I had this aha moment that, like, yes, I wanted all these toys, and I understand why we have a race to the bottom in the industry with folks wanting to over-refine cannabis, but I was lucky enough to be confronted with myself and be like, wait, that's not what got us here. What got us here, candidly, was things grown in grandma's garden and things made in grandma's kitchen. Most of the high quality products, in fact, I think during our traditional market, the products were higher quality in dispensaries because they were usually grown with care, and definitely any value added products like the one Papa and Barkley makes, tinctures and the like, were also usually made with care. It is paining me recently that in an unregulated market, we had higher quality products. And now you go into a dispensary and you see high fructose corn syrup, you see artificial flavors, you see artificial dyes, and yet they still want to be a dispensary, which by definition is a wellness center. And so having kind of started to take all these things in early on, I was like, oh, I definitely need to do this as natural as possible. We weren't really saying the word solventless at the time, but that's what we were driving to, right? Sure, we knew how to make bubble hash. Fresh frozen was on the radar yet. I was still growing indoors, but luckily, as things would happen, a gentleman named John O'Connor, who's here in Eureka and happens to be a family member of my partner Adam, said, hey, this is 2015. He said, hey, you know, Eureka's looking to do some kind of local authorization. Perhaps you guys want to check it out. And it was, you know, right at that time when we had already started getting Papa and Barkley in market, we were starting to scale. And I realized that, you know, when you do a grow, you can keep it pretty compartmentalized. But when you start getting 400-gallon drums of coconut oil delivered to a house, your neighbors tend to be like, what's going on over there? So we came up to Humboldt. We saw some, you know, there was only a small zone right there at the end of 4th Street. Luckily, or not luckily for the folks, but I guess where the Honey Winery and another music place had burnt down, we're able to sweet talk Mr. Kelly Martin into renting to us, because everybody was still very scared of cannabis, because, you know, we hadn't even had the vote yet. And that's how Papa and Barkley started. I was aware of Humboldt as a young grower down in Southern California, because around the harvest time, we would get loads of cannabis, and all of a sudden I'd have to probably take a back seat and wait for that to cycle through. And now I find in dispensaries, we've forgotten about the harvest. We've forgotten about that time in October and November where all this awesome sun-grown cannabis happens. And I want to start to bring that back to dispensaries, because I do feel like our current dispensaries seem to be stepping away from plant medicine as opposed to leaning into it, which is what our company really, really wants to do and push. And so being aware that, you know, great cannabis always comes from Humboldt, I did come up, you know, for a couple of years to Reggae on the River, which is where I got a lot of my actual lessons. Like, I didn't know how to make bubble hash. I really didn't understand tinctures or RSO until, you know, it was like maybe 2008, 2009, 2010, those years, coming up to Reggae, meeting people. You know, back then it was before like information blackout or the notion of IP. So folks usually just, if you were willing and wanted to just be a nice person, people are usually willing to share information with you, share. So that spirit and vibe of community, of cannabis community, I really felt up here in those early years. And so I jumped at the chance to come here. We then started our company here, and then doubled down as part of our company identity was going to be sun-grown, because even though I raised a family indoors, that's because we had to. We don't have to do that anymore. So why should we? We know the easier, more sustainable ways, right? Not necessarily easier, but the more sustainable ways, the right way to do things, I should say. We also, at first we were about to grow, but then meeting folks in the community, I was like, wait, it's one thing to bring outside money and maybe start something that isn't here, like a manufacturing facility. There weren't many of those, but to start a grow when there's so many legacy growers, generational growers, no, we need to partner with them. So another big thing of our guardrail, brand guardrails, was honoring Humboldt farmers. We partner with about 200 small farms throughout the Emerald Triangle, but we do try to keep it focused in Humboldt. And like, if it was up to me, I would double down on that. One of the reasons why I wanted to join the call is to talk about things like that directly help my business, but I think we are stronger together. We need to brand Humboldt and take the mantle that I think we rightfully deserve in being that epicenter of cannabis, not just in the country, but worldwide. It's the only way I think we really survive, because we already start to see Oregon is overgrown, other states are overgrown, because the blessing of cannabis is that she wants to grow and help us, but we do it right here. And at the very least, we have that legacy, we have that culture. I think those things are important. I know with the new money coming in, the bankers don't get that, but just because they don't get it, doesn't mean it's not there. What I've told them recently is like, you know, if you want to talk about margins and all, you want to be about numbers, well, real margins happen when you have a story and richness. There's a reason why wines in Napa sell for so much more than $2 chuck. It's because of where they come from and the perception that it's done better. Well, we actually do it better. It's not just a perception. And I think that needs to be codified and started to export to the state so that we can get that little bit more value that secures these folks that actually, I think, are responsible for the actual legalization of cannabis. Because I think if Humboldt wasn't putting out the kind of capacity that was year over year these last few decades, I don't know that the industry would look the way it does today. So our interest is in definitely supporting our community. We, of course, love these kinds of events, Perilous Plunge, however we can give back to the community, because we are also trying to destigmatize cannabis. We can be good members, valuable members of the community, and I always say that if you want acceptance, you cannot wait for somebody to give it to you. You have to take it. Show up, present yourself, do the right thing, and everything else will happen. So that's how we approach our time here in Humboldt.
Great. Thank you, Guy. We hear your passion radiating through. Thanks. So we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we want to talk about the current regulation kind of scenarios that the cannabis industry is faced with. For that, I think, were we going to start with you, Natalie, on that, or did we want to start with Michelle? So Michelle can talk about county, but with Michelle, okay, let's start with Michelle.
Okay, well, I don't know if people on this call know, but starting back in 2016, when Humboldt County came forward with, they wanted to do what they call the 1.0 licensing. The Board of Supervisors in January adopted that and opened up. Really, the 1.0 was to encourage cultivators that wanted to get out from being, unregulated to regulations. And so from January until December, Humboldt County took licenses at the Planning and Building Department. And at that time, by the end of December of 2016, there were 2,034 applications. But what was really kind of telling about the cultivation community is how unsure they were. Prop 64 wasn't voted in until November. And so this was a medical marijuana use kind of 1.0 ordinance. And in the last 3 weeks of December, there were only 46 applications previous to December. And from December 1st until December 31st, there were over, I think, almost 1,600 more applications that came in, which was a huge volume. And so then Prop 64 passed. And so what happened with the regulations was pretty much come in, do an application, and we'll work with you to get you into compliance through a long process. And then that was the 1.0, which has a lot of stuff into it. It would be too much to go into today, but that was the first part of Humboldt County legalization. And then born out of a lawsuit, actually, the 2.0 came, and really that was around environmental issues and not having a certified EIR, which then they started on the 2.0 with all the environmental documentation that needed to be done. But I think what really is important to talk about also with legalization and permitting is that the 1.0 and the 2.0 had tons of public meetings. Very many, Supervisor Estelle Fennell at that time, Rex Bone and the other board members held many community meetings throughout Humboldt County, attended with the cultivators, non-cultivators, to get people's thoughts and to see, what their thoughts were around regulation. Currently today, there's been, since 16 to current, there's been so many different things that have been thrown at cultivators through regulation process. And currently today we have around 740 1.0, which would be pre-existing cultivation permits. And then total, we have 1,027 permits in Humboldt County, with a few more in the queue that will come forward. I think that's really subject, though, with the status of the economic downturn with cannabis, whether people will continue going forward. And then also currently we're seeing through Humboldt County ordinance, a lot of farms dropping out of that process, coming in and now decommissioning their farms. And so I think I'll pass it to Natalie then for some more state and Fish and Wildlife and Water Board regulations that came forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. And when I gave my background as EPIC is because I really want to stress that the environmental community was very much involved in the development of the first land use ordinance. And as Michelle said, it was about encouraging pre-existing operators to come into compliance. So unlike a place like Colorado, where Colorado did not have a substantial pre-existing cultivation industry, California did. California in the 2014-2015 had an estimated potential 40 to 60,000 cultivation sites across the state. So what we're talking about is creating a regulatory structure to go around something that already exists. So here in Humboldt, our existing farms were often located on former logging lands, off long miles and stretches of dirt roads, in the forest. They were not out in the flatlands with no tree cover, because that would have been an enforcement issue. So they were tucked back, often in what we referred to as the steep and deep. Sometimes these are farms that are up at the headwaters, ridgelines. And so what we really worked on was to make sure that the farms had a pathway to follow environmental laws, because the county cannot make rules that are less stringent than state laws. So the county has to follow endangered species laws, clean air laws, clean water laws. There's water laws to protect quality and quantity. All of those things were integrated into the first land use ordinance. And what the county did is they assessed what is known as baseline in CEQA, and they said, there are this many grows. If we can bring as many as possible into compliance and then improve the quality of how the cultivation is, we will improve the environment. The county did what's called a mitigated negative environmental impact. And it really was about baseline and bringing existing operators in. It was not about allowing a bunch of new grows in. That was saved for the second term. So every single cultivator that is following, and I'll use another example. In early 2016, we made this compliance handbook, and it was only like 16 pages. And we're like, if you follow these check boxes, you will be able to get a permit. That thing is almost laughable now when I see it, because how much changed in the surveys that needed to be done. And, first it was, we were definitely making sure we're protecting salmon, but then we realized, oh yeah, there's owls. So we need to deal with certain noise conditions and streamside management setbacks. We need to do potentially archaeological studies. All of these things had to go in as part of bringing this pre-existing industry into compliance. And so, that number of about 2,300 people said that they would sign up. And they did. They signed up. They admitted past culpability, and they started to go through this process. And unfortunately, what has happened is over the last 8 years, we've had a significant drop off, meaning we don't have 2,300 pre-existing operators anymore. We have 750-ish maybe. So we've lost almost 70% of our legacy farms. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I'm not going to pass judgment on it, but we are losing the very cultural heartbeat that makes Humboldt unique and special to what Guy was saying, what separates us from these other areas. We have fewer than 1,000 operations now in Humboldt County. That's both new and pre-existing. And I had a recent conversation with Sheriff Hansel, and he said that he thinks that there are about 1,000 unregulated grows that still remain in the county. And so 15,000 to 1,000, let's say 2,000. Again, we've had over a 70% reduction in cannabis in the last 8 years.
Now, can I add something though?
Please.
And as I see a bunch of questions, 15,000 grow sites doesn't mean 15,000 farmers. In 2015, UC Berkeley did a study that came back with that in Humboldt County, there were recognized 15,000 grow sites. So that could have been, I can tell you that back, and Johnny maybe could say also, back in the day, you spread it out, right? You might have 100 here, a 50 there. You might be on a property that's 2,000 acres, but your idea was you were hiding it. So that doesn't mean there were 15,000 farmers. And in fact, I know there weren't.
No,
And-
certainly
yeah,
not. Yeah,
yeah.
it's estimated maybe 6,000 to 8,000, which is why I think it's so meaningful that 2,300 showed up to apply. And, and Michael was asking some questions about, cultivation size, and, they don't know how big the 15,000 was, but what we do know is that we have 340 acres as licensed cultivation now. And for context, what is 340 acres? That is a half a square mile. You can fit all of the cultivation in this entire county in the footprint of Myrtletown. And so again, for context, that is a fraction of a single percent of the total square mileage of our entire county. So when we talk about like this is this big number, there's this big green rush, it is not true. All of the cultivation that is legal in this county fits in a half a square mile. It is such an important part of our community that is really so tiny contextually.
Well, and also to put it in perspective, Humboldt County is 2.3 million acres. So you want to put it into perspective of, 350 to 400 acres of cannabis on 2.3 million acres, which is Humboldt now. And I know, when you talk about large landscapes, and maybe Guy can, or anybody, but I think there's some farms down south that are over 100 acres. So you put that in perspective with Humboldt County cultivation and what we do here. And that is also through a regulatory process through Humboldt County that doesn't allow, what a mega grow, really 8 acres or below. And so that came through like regulation as well. I'm sorry, I got a frog.
To your point, Michelle, I think Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, last year, we heard rumors of one farm in Santa Barbara or Salinas County that was capable of producing more cannabis than all the farms combined in Humboldt County alone. So that's what we're competing with. That's what my 5,000 square foot farm is competing with. And the thing that makes me unique and special and sees the light at the end of the tunnel is this community and what we stand for. And like you were saying, our stories that make us special, and this community that makes us special. And we really need to, in my opinion, work together on how to make that work with everybody, make it acceptable with everybody, and how we can generate revenue and interest from the outside world to come here, to spend their money, to stay at our hotels, to eat our food, and to celebrate something that maybe we created when it wasn't legal, but now that is legal, that we can celebrate and highlight along with all the other things with logging and the wind generators that are being put up, and the ocean and all the special unique redwoods that we have. So that's the challenge ahead for, I think, all of us as a county, to really combat together and to figure out a solution for.
Yeah, and on that, and to that point, Johnny, in order for us to get out there and to get to market and to amplify, like, hey, this is from Humboldt County, because anywhere in California, anywhere in the country, as a matter of fact, anywhere in the world, if you say Humboldt, people's ears perk up. Humboldt is synonymous with the absolute highest quality cannabis known. And so it really is like the seat of modern cannabis. And in order to do that, we've got to be able to get out there. And the more we get out there, and I feel that the more our brands get into the market, the more it brings people to Humboldt, the more it puts Humboldt on the map.
With all the different hurdles that the cultivators had to overcome, and we signed up for it, we wanted to do it, we wanted to contribute and be a part of this, creating history together. We were just getting to a point where we believed that, we started building a relationship with Humboldt County, They were building this ship as they were sailing, and we were trying to help them. We were trying to help the state regulators, create an industry that we could even participate in. And now there's been something added to one of our challenges, that if we're not able to overcome that, and if we don't get your help to overcome that, that we would be the first county in the world to be eliminated from being able to produce cannabis. And I probably took that a little bit too far, but I'll let somebody that's a lot more knowledgeable, like Natalie or Natalie, talk about that, because it's really an important issue that going to affect everybody.
I did want to jump in on this, which is what California has created with the legal market is a very complicated supply chain. Farmers are forced to sell to distributors. Manufacturers are not allowed to sell direct to consumers. Everything has to go through retail. Retail is a gigantic bottleneck in the state of California because almost 68% of the state still has prohibition on retail sales. So while we have this amazing production and we're creating wonderful brands, we are dealing with issues of supply chain blockages, a lack of retail access, overproduction from other parts of the state, and then issues around people and businesses throughout the entire supply chain not being able to collect payment for products that they're sold. And a lot of that has to do with the still federal prohibition, lack of access to banking, lack of access to capital, and antiquated tax filing requirements that don't allow these cannabis businesses to write off typical business write-offs. And so we are dealing in this very complicated system that is, and wearing my state policy hat, we work in coalition with another group called Origins Council and other coalitions to try to make these little tiny, well, we're trying to make giant fixes at the state level, but they turn into little tiny fixes a couple a year while our industry is suffocating. Right now, one of the big initiatives that we're working on, the two big initiatives that we're working on, are farmer direct sales at events that would allow people like Tina and Johnny to sell direct to consumers. Because once we got legalization, they lost connection to their patients, their clients. We need to reopen that pathway. We are working on it. We are sponsoring a bill through Origins Council, AB 111 or 1111 with Assemblymember Pellerin to bring this to fruition. This will be the third time we've tried. Hopefully we're going to get it across the line. We're also working with Congressman Jared Huffman on the SHIP Act, which would enable small farmers and small manufacturers to have direct sales when federal legalization happens, to again be able to access their patients directly. There is a bright future for craft cannabis from Humboldt and the Emerald Triangle. We are growing and creating something truly unique that is environmentally stewarded. We have water here on the North Coast. We have an amazing story, culture, genetics, know-how, something that is truly unique to this place that does not exist in other places, but we need these pathways to be opened up. We need to be empowering and enabling our small businesses to adapt and remain flexible. We do not need draconian new rules coming down that are going to directly harm the very people who have made this the lifeblood of an aspect of our economy.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore that the dispensary problem, I feel like it's a problem we've always had, but right now as we come into the end of the quarter, they're facing their quarterly taxes, but more important, I believe at the end of April, for the first time, they'll be ponying up the excise tax, which was shifted to them. And, I'll share candidly, we have millions of dollars in accounts receivable throughout the state. It's kind of ridiculous. And recently, I've taken to just being a little bit more firm because the brands that are being paid are not the correct brands. They're not us. They're paying some of the folks, we don't need to mention names, that create the cheapest products that, in my opinion, don't even belong in a dispensary. because that's what they perceive the consumer wants. I had an expert marketing person tell me once, well, you're not the average consumer, and we need to meet the consumer where they are. It took me years to actually get these words, but it dawned on me that, okay, it is true that we need to meet the consumers where they are, but the only ones qualified to do that are those of us who know where we're going. This is an emerging industry, and we are going somewhere. This is not where we're dropping anchor, not with these regulations, not with the way the culture has been rolled out at this time. So we do need to take these customers on a journey, and lo and behold, they're doing that. Some of the original bankers were like, well, can't you do a gummy that's 1 milligram? I was like, nobody wants that. You might want that. And sure enough, now we're debating whether it should be 10, right? So, folks are, the industry is emerging, the consumers are evolving, but yet we have these dispensaries that are acting quite immaturely. There's no product segmentation. If you go into most dispensaries, everything's just put in a shelf. It's also part of regulation that they can't truly merchandise the way a typical store goes. But you go into Target or any other store, and you know why something's in a locked case. You know why something's on a top shelf. It's differentiated just even from positioning. So even if there's no salesperson around, the consumer has some intuitive idea like, oh, this is probably more expensive because of a reason. Let me read the label. Let me ask why. Doesn't mean that they're always going to get the value, the high value product. Bud Light is still the highest selling beer. That doesn't mean that there's not craft beer in other levels. In our industry, somehow our retailers are just not doing that. It's like still a money grab, and they haven't leveled up yet. I don't know how we get to that, but I do think that, again, coming back to this branding of Humboldt, us staying stronger together and sending a clear message to all the whatever it is, 800 dispensaries throughout the state, that Humboldt cannabis is premium, and sun-grown cannabis is premium, and perhaps you should be having a section in your store that highlights that, so that consumers can still stay connected to the plant, I think is an initiative or something that we could do together. They need our help to just understand how to sell cannabis, because right now they just take anything you give them, put it in a case, and sell the cheapest thing on milligrams. I don't know how that's still happening, even 7 years after legalization. And I'm genuinely scared for a lot of brands and a lot of folks in these next couple of months, because I know folks who haven't been paid for months for their product. It's kind of crazy.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Guy.
you're probably looking at a couple of those two farmers that have that challenge. And most of the people I know, their biggest challenge is getting paid, because with the oversaturation in the market, none of the distributors and the retailers are motivated to give the farmer, pay them when they receive our product. It's always on I guess, for lack of a better word, a front. And unless everything works out all the way down the chain, then it just ultimately at the end of the day doesn't work out for the farmer, and we're the ones that don't get paid.
Oof. Reality is tough. So thanks everybody for the input so far. We're not quite done. I do want to take maybe the next 7 or 8 minutes. The next 7 to 10 minutes to talk about what the title of this session is about, and that's the future of the cannabis community or the cannabis industry in Humboldt. And I think part of that is ongoing, potential threats in the form of legislation or ballot measures, things like that. So I'm going to open it up to Natalyn to talk about some of that. But then I also want to hear, I would love to close out on what my last question to all of you before we go to Q&A will be, what are your 2 or 3 things that you're most hopeful about that creates a hopeful future for cannabis in Humboldt County? So fair warning, get to think about that. But for right now, we'll jump to Natalyn.
Well, as I was just saying, I think that craft cannabis has an amazing future as we move forward into federal legalization. And what I have learned through policy development over the last 15 years is that policy, laws, and regulations need to remain flexible and adaptable to the changing climate. And I can tell all of you that I look back on what happened during Ordinance 1.0 and realize we didn't catch everything. And so when we didn't catch everything, that's why an ordinance needs to be able to adapt and amend. We've been sort of dancing around an elephant that's in the room, and that is called the Humboldt Cannabis Reform Initiative. And this is a citizen initiative that was brought forward and written by a very small group of people. It is 38 pages of policy that amends the Humboldt County General Plan, the local coastal plan, and the county's 2 cannabis land use ordinances. It was given a very misleading title called the Large Cannabis Cultivation Restriction Initiative, and it was titled. I do not know anybody who read the 38 pages that comes from an environmental organization, a county agency, a cannabis industry that actually read the 38 pages before it was submitted to go to voters. Submitted to the county elections office to start gathering signatures. As soon as it was submitted it was publicly submitted, HCGA read it, we evaluated it and said, oh my God, there are gigantic problems with this. This is a policy document. This is not marketing material. Laws and policies are very specific words that need to be followed. And so intent doesn't matter. The words on the paper matter. And what was created was 38 pages of brand new policy that amends these 4 documents, the general plan, coastal plan, and 2 land use ordinances. It was never reviewed by public. It was given a misleading title. We went to the proponents and said, oh my God, please don't do this. Proponents went forward anyway, and for 6 months gathered signatures from the public, and they managed to gather 7,000 signatures. A lot of times when they were out gathering signatures, they were saying things like, help protect the small farmers, protect Humboldt from corporate grows, sign our petition. Some people may have read it, some people may not have read it, but the fact remains is that 7,000 people added their name to this petition, which then mandates that the Board of Supervisors either adopt it as is or put it to the voters. The board did not adopt it as is because they did not. It's going to the voters on March 5th, 2024. This citizen initiative cannot be changed. There are no words that can be changed. And so when we say things like, this will result in negative impacts to every single cannabis farm of every single farm size in the county, we are not being hyperbole. And it's because they missed language, either intentionally or unintentionally, and it cannot be fixed. And this initiative cannot be fixed without going back to voters at a future point in time. That is the worst way in the entire world to create policy for a moving, dynamic, flexible industry that is still not through prohibition. We are not through federal prohibition. What we need is our supervisors, our state agencies to continue to adapt and amend, and it's called adaptive management. And that is what has happened with our county, with the state agencies, and with the environmental agencies. We actually have created something that functionally works. I know people don't like to hear that, but it does kind of actually work. 70% of our permitted farms already have their annual state licenses with the state. If the voters approved the HCRI, every one of those permits would be in jeopardy. And we could actually end up moving backwards if the voters approved it. And so the county has put together an analysis. I'll put a link in the sidebar. I really encourage everybody to read the county's analysis and read for yourself specifically what will happen. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it is a very problematic document that it can be voluntarily withdrawn by the proponents. But it's 3 people are holding the entire cannabis industry in their hand. And that is a very challenging point for us to be able to come forward to all of you when we're trying to move forward. How do we make and support rural economic development, support our farms, support environmental improvements, develop tourism sectors, and none of that can happen with this HCRI hanging over our heads.
Yeah, I think one good point to that too is it's not going to just affect our farms. It will affect my farm tremendously, and I don't know if I will survive and be able to move forward if it does pass. But it will affect, as much as we've all seen the cannabis, the kind of the downturn of the cannabis industry affect this county and the Emerald Triangle already. This will affect not only the farms, but it will affect every other business, manufacturer, processing, distributors. It will almost eliminate all of those. And really the repercussions of that will be really, truly devastating to this county. And I don't like to be a doomsayer. We'll find a way. And yes, we would probably get through it, but it will be the most impactful thing that I've ever seen in my lifetime. So please read the link for sure.
Thanks, Johnny and Nadeline. And I will boldly speak up on behalf of the Greater Eureka Chamber. We were asked by a couple of our members who are in the cannabis industry to consider opposing the HCRI ballot measure. And our board last week voted unanimously to oppose this ballot initiative. So, and to continue our commitment to supporting the cannabis industry and things like that. But I just want to say that on behalf of the Eureka Chamber, we have taken that stance on this particular ballot measure. It's important for you all as chamber members to know that. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to have at least 10 minutes for Q&A. We've had some great questions asked in the chat. So if you want to continue to put things in the chat. One thing that I didn't mention is sometimes people have questions that they want to ask, but they don't want to be public in their asking. If you would like to private message me any questions that you have, and I can ask them on your behalf so you can maintain your anonymity, I am glad to do that as well. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our presenters to just real quickly, I gave you forewarning, so hopefully you're ready. To just share with us just a couple of quick reasons why you are hopeful for the future of the cannabis industry and what that looks like. Like Johnny, you might want to talk about cannatourism and other things that are important to you that you're excited about and what you think the future of cannabis, with the hopes that HCRI doesn't pass, but what can that look like? So we will we started with you, Michelle. Let's go ahead and start with you again.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to add a couple things to some holes that I thought I probably forgot. So with permitting in Humboldt County through the planning department, I don't know if most people know, but permitting is for unincorporated areas of Humboldt County. And so Riedel is exempt from those. They have their own cannabis ordinance. Fortuna doesn't have any cultivation, Eureka, so forth. So anywhere that's incorporated, that is different structure than Humboldt County cannabis as far as the permitting agency. So I really want to make that known that it is the unincorporated areas of Humboldt County. What I hope for in the future for cannabis, for Humboldt County and for everybody, which everybody now feels the touch of the cannabis industry, Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity are down in sales tax where every other county in California, which there's 58 counties, is not seeing the drastic reduction in sales tax. That's telling sign. Cannabis is not 100% the reason, but it is a big reason. And so people in the past, if you thought your businesses weren't dependent on that culture, we're now realizing that, everybody feels that. And so I want permitting continuity for farmers, like the moving target, which is really hard and difficult to pivot as a farmer when you spend a lot of money to permit your property, and you jump through all of the regulations that are required, and then all of a sudden the people higher up, whether it be the DCC or Humboldt County, say, oh, well, that doesn't work, let's do this, without the realization that do this means for the farmers to do that, to change something that they've already done, that they've already spent money on, that they've already worked harder for. I think Madeline said it earlier that, the farmers, part of the documentation is environmental stewardship, and to make sure that the environment is being protected as well. And so while there are good thoughts around that, I think we do, the cannabis cultivators do that. And so I just want sustainability for them and consistency for them. And I want Humboldt County to recognize, the thriving economic driver that cannabis has been in the past. I would like to see a little bit of that come back, and that can't happen just with Humboldt County rules. It has to be the state as well, and so I just really hope to see that in the future.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to jump to Guy, and if you can keep your this may be some of the most important information, but keep your responses a little bit brief. So we can get to Q&A, that would be helpful. So Guy, go ahead.
Sure. Look, I think it might have been Natalie. I do believe that, you can't ban cannabis. We've gotten through, we've done this. Cannabis is not going away. It could be made illegal again. We've been there. And sometimes I wonder if that wasn't the better place. So for me, my hope is that cannabis, we have won this war on drugs as far as from my perspective, and we're just negotiating the surrender of a stubborn enemy. I'm hopeful that as consumers and as more people use cannabis and more people respond to the medicine, that we will have the will of the people to continue to make, as Natalie said, small adjustments, because that's how government works. I do see us getting to where we need to be, where we have laws that are equitable and treat us fairly. So, when I think about some of the things I have to do value added compared to, let's say, the alcohol and tobacco providers compared to pharma providers, real toxins and things that are killing people, facts, right? Like we can just look to the data and say, this is what your products do. This is what my product does. But yet I have this huge tax and this onerous around, the safety of my product. I was talking to Swami the other day and I asked him, I was like, oh, there's, 6,000 bars. He's like, the bars are nothing because at least they don't let kids in there. What about every restaurant? What about every hotel? What about every supermarket that sells alcohol and lets kids run around? Meanwhile, we're put so far on the back burner. It's crazy, but that is not a fact. I look at that old adage of the tortoise and the hare. To me, it's like love and hate. Hate and vitriol burns fast and it just grabs on quickly. Love and truth take time, but they are real and they will always be there. Eventually, the hate and the misinformation will subside and the truth will be there and will be there as well. And so I am hopeful that this plant in our industry will be here. Is it a hard road now? Sure, but we're not going anywhere.
Great. Thanks, Guy. Let's jump over to Johnny.
Yeah, thanks. The couple hopes that I have is, first and foremost, it's always been about this community to me and the people around me. And I want to find a way, and I want to apologize for some of my past actions and really develop a relationship with the northern part of the county and the southern part of the county, and all work together really to figure out a way that we could all work together and thrive and to increase tourism in this county. And being one of 3 tourism permitted farms in Humboldt County, really wanted to try to figure out ways to expand that, and really seen the responses from people here in the past with doing that, and want to explore to even expand that even more with everybody.
Thanks, Johnny. Natalie, I'm going to have you go next, and then Tina, bring your vision home with us.
We have protections, state law protections for county of origin. So Humboldt Cannabis, we need to ensure that the long-term intellectual property of Humboldt Cannabis remains with the people, the industry itself, so it doesn't get exploited by outside operators. We have laws allowing for appellation development. Farmers are working in Willow Creek and the Mattole to develop the first appellation petitions. We need to continue and find better pathways of partnering with tourism organizations to include cannabis within Humboldt's economic viability and reasons people come here. We need to talk about cannabis as an export item, because while people do come here, and you can apparently sell sand at the beach, people do come here to experience Humboldt cannabis and they do want to buy it. Thank you. But we need to have collective marketing strategies that can help teach people about the value of sun-grown craft cannabis coming from the Emerald Triangle. We need to keep working with our legislators to enable future direct-to-consumer sales, interstate commerce, and federal legalization. We have a plan to how to move all of this forward. We just need to be patient, but we can do it. But we need to make sure that we don't have horizontal hostility coming from inside of our own community that is then sucking the resources out of our ability to have the big picture conversations that we need to be having, and instead vacuuming emotional, financial, and mental resources out so that we have to deal with this assault that's called the HCRI. So Humboldt Craft Cannabis is here to stay. We are committed to being important contributing members to our community, and we just need you to help let us be our best selves. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Natalie. And then Tina, and then we'll go to a Q&A. And can you all, I'm looking at the speakers, can you stay on a few extra minutes if needed for Q&A?
I have a 1:30, I cannot.
Okay, but if you can, that would be helpful, just in case it goes a little bit longer. But Tina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. You know, what I'm most excited about is research and education and an ongoing effort to provide the best possible cannabis to people. I feel that it is such a huge task and responsibility. And after so many people have put themselves at risk and sacrificed so much to get to the point where we are, and our numbers are rapidly diminishing. And so at this point, I think that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. We need the support of community, and we need the love from our community. We need to know that we are not only accepted, but that we have the support of the rest of the community to move forward through this challenging time. And to put this in perspective just a little bit, Johnny and myself were approached by a Columbia University chemist a couple of years ago who reached out to us because he acquired some of our cannabis in Southern California and wrote to both of us asking, hey, what is the difference between this and what I'm getting in New York, which is not, I don't feel is benefiting me. So we started doing studies with this guy, and I'm just gonna, in the chat here, folks, you can read this article for yourselves. It's published in a scientific review. And these studies are beginning to happen. This research is starting to happen. And what it's showing us is that there is something unique about full season sun-grown cannabis. And so it's what we've all known all along. It's what, if you're in New York and you say Humboldt County, you see people turn their heads, because there is something very special about this plant when grown in this environment. And so so my biggest, not only concern, but hope right now, and what I'm excited about, is access to really reach people, because the benefit this could bring to people will be so much greater than what they have access to right now in the market. And the more we can do for people, I feel that that is our responsibility, and the better that is our contribution as a community.
I'm muted. Thank you so much, Tina. That was really a wonderful capstone to this conversation. And on behalf of the chamber, I do want to, remain around for those who do have questions, but on behalf of the chamber, want to thank you all again for giving us your time and your wisdom and your experience to this conversation. And we are supportive of the cannabis community. If I think that there were a few people who snuck in who we let sneak into this conversation who are not Eureka Chamber members, but if you'd like to become a Eureka Chamber member and lend your voice to this conversation, we welcome you to join as well. And I'll put a link, or I'll put my email in this as well. And I also want to give a shout out to the Southern Humboldt Chamber of Commerce, and hopefully they will, if you are in Southern Humboldt, you can join them as well. They're very active on this front. So with that, I know we're really super short on time. If you have questions, I'm going to unspotlight our speakers so that I can see them more readily. Let's see. If you can raise your hand so we can see you, that would be helpful if you have a specific question that you would like to ask any of our speakers. Trying to remove my own spotlight. There we go. Any questions you have for our speakers? They answered all your questions. If there's anything, we'll give you a moment. If there's anything you'd like to ask, but don't want to be that person, you can message that to me real quickly.
While you're waiting, Nancy, I just wanted to just do an informal invite to all the chamber members to make their way down here this summer, sometime after June, and maybe on their way out to Shelter Cove. They're more than welcome to come by the farm and really can show them around and give them a different perspective on what a cannabis farm could really look like, and where I grew up. So
Yeah, Johnny, is the West Side Live Market, I think, is going to happen Memorial Day weekend out at the Whitethorn Construction Campus. And so this is a great way to do in-county tourism staycation. I know for a lot of people that live in the north, you don't make it out to Shelter Cove very often. And so great opportunity, go out Bryceland. There's wine tasting at Bryceland Vineyard. Whitethorn Vineyard is also doing wine tasting. There's going to be meet the farmers opportunity, and then head out to Shelter Cove and get those amazing Black Sand Beach experiences. But I just really want to encourage our northerners to take trips to Southern Humboldt. Southern Humboldt spends its money in Northern Humboldt, Willow Creek spends its money in Eureka, but we really need to have help from our urban areas visiting out into our rural areas and spending money. Go stay at the Benbow, have that romantic date night, because it really is helpful to help share the wealth around our community.
Great. Wonderful pitches for some beautiful staycations in Southern Humboldt. And I will say I'm part of Leadership Redwood Coast, who it will be down in Southern Humboldt next week, and we'll be talking with many of these speakers with our 25 participants in Leadership Redwood Coast. We'll also be talking with the chamber down there and others about the economic impact of the downturn of the cannabis industry, things like that. So we're continuing our conversations with these folks next week as well, and we'll be out in Johnny's farm to do that. So excited to be out there. I do have a direct message to me, a question. Could any of the speakers talk about the general outlook on or needs in healthcare or mental health care, especially with these transition stressors, services to support the industry? So as I understand that, are there folks who are experiencing stress who are in the cannabis industry who may need mental health support or healthcare support? If I'm interpreting that question, and if I'm not interpreting it correctly, please correct me in chat. Anybody want to respond to that?
I can speak to it briefly. I mean, yes, I mean, I think we're all stressed, and mental health is something that I think we should just always be having the conversation. I think that cannabis people are in this interesting place, like any community that's been oppressed by systemic bias. It pops up in different ways. And I think that, again, getting together and putting out education, putting out normalizing things and having the real support and the real embracing of this thing so we can start to let go of those biases is important. Because for me, the stress comes, it's bad enough that it's hard. We're playing this business. It's like if it was a video game, it's like on the most extreme setting. Like if you're in cannabis, you are a real business person if you're navigating this landscape. But moreover, people still throw shade. Like, you know, I'm very proud of our industry and proud of what I do. But oftentimes, you know, I get the sense that others make me feel like I shouldn't be proud. And that kind of bias causes another kind of stress, right? We've been fighting for legitimacy, and folks like myself who've just been advocating forever, it's like, I got a thick skin around this. I'm shameless about my pride around cannabis, but that's not everybody. There's lots of folks entering, a lot of young folks entering who are still listening to this misinformation, are still subject to this cannabis shame and bias, and that might be a deterrent. We might be turning away good young talent right now because we still have this shame and weirdness around our industry. And so the ability to talk about doing the right thing, the morally right thing, doesn't always jive with the legally right thing. Yeah, I think that's a mental stress that we can all appreciate.
Thanks, Guy. And hopefully that responded to that question. With that, seeing no more questions, we will go ahead and close out our time here. Again, thanks to Michelle, she had to jump off, but to Johnny, Natalie, Guy, and Tina as well for your time and your wisdom and your passion for this industry and helping us better understand how we can support the businesses that you all run as part of our greater economic reality here in Humboldt County. So again, we are doing these sessions more or less monthly. The next couple of sessions that we'll be doing, as I mentioned at the top of this gathering, will be on transportation. We'll kind of cover the gamut on transportation. We're lining up our speakers for that, as well as on housing. Everybody's, you know, such a top of mind issue for, you know, in every meeting I'm in, it seems these days. So we are glad to do this in support of our members and the broader community. We will be sharing this recording. There were folks who registered who weren't able to attend, so we'll go ahead and send out the recording of this to them as well, and we'll make the recording. It'll be up on our YouTube page as well. So again, thanks to everybody for participating. We are here to support the success and economic development of our community, and glad to do so. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.